At a Washington park, a 2-year-old toddler vanished without a trace. Her mother had stepped away briefly to grab a fresh diaper bag from her car when a friendly woman offered to watch the child. But when she returned just minutes later, both the woman and her daughter had disappeared. Police investigations initially yielded nothing, but 48 hours later, a park janitor made a shocking discovery inside the nearby restroom, evidence that left everyone involved fearing the worst. Rachel Bennett sat motionless in the hard plastic chair of the Sequim Police Department waiting room, her gaze fixed on the scuffed tile floor beneath her feet. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting an unforgiving glare that emphasized the dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't slept more than a handful of hours in the past 48 hours, not since her 2.5-year-old daughter, Haley, had vanished from Everpine Park. Her trembling hands clutched a slightly worn photograph of Haley. The picture had been taken earlier that day at the park's playground. Haley's smile was wide, her eyes crinkled with laughter. In the photo, she wore her favorite red Elmo t-shirt, the same shirt she had on when she disappeared. Rachel glanced at the wall clock. 4:37 p.m. She had just finished her second exhaustive interview with Detective Hart, a methodical, stone-faced man with kind eyes that betrayed his professional demeanor. For 2 hours, they had once again dissected every excruciating minute of that afternoon at Everpine Park. "Ms. Bennett?" the desk officer called out, startling her. "Detective Hart says it'll be about 20 more minutes before the forensics team calls in with their update." Rachel nodded, her throat too tight to form words. She returned to staring at the floor, replaying the events for the 1,000th time in her mind. It had been a perfectly ordinary Thursday afternoon. She had taken Haley to Everpine Park after picking her up from daycare. The spring weather was mild, and Haley had been excited about going on the swings, her favorite. Rachel remembered how Haley had squealed with delight as they approached the playground, her tiny hand tugging insistently at Rachel's. Everything changed so quickly. Haley had a sudden bout of diarrhea, soiling her pull-up diaper badly. Rachel realized she'd left the diaper bag in her car, parked about 200 feet away in the lot. She tried to coax Haley to come with her, but the toddler had firmly planted herself on the swing, lower lip jutting out stubbornly as she began to throw one of her typical tantrums. "No go!" "Swing more," Haley had protested, her small face scrunching up with determination. That's when the woman on the park bench had spoken up. "I can watch her for a minute if you need to grab something," she'd offered with a warm smile. "I'm Melissa. I'm a kindergarten teacher. My son is over there on the monkey bars." Rachel had hesitated, looking between the friendly woman and her screaming daughter. It would only take 5 minutes tops. "Are you sure you don't mind?" Rachel had asked. "Not at all," Melissa replied, already moving to sit beside Haley on the adjacent swing. "We teachers are used to diaper emergencies. Take your time." 5 minutes. That's all it had taken for her world to collapse. When Rachel returned with the diaper bag, both Haley and the woman were gone. She'd immediately scanned the playground, her heart rate accelerating with each passing second. She called out Haley's name, drawing curious and then concerned looks from other parents. Perhaps they'd gone to the bathroom? Rachel had rushed to the park's restrooms, pushing open the heavy door with mounting panic. The women's restroom had been empty, each stall door ajar, no sign of Haley or Melissa. She'd checked the men's room too, calling Haley's name with increasing desperation. Nothing. That's when she'd called 911, her voice breaking as she reported her missing child. Park security had been alerted immediately, and within 20 minutes, police officers had swarmed Everpine Park, questioning witnesses and forming search parties. They had called David immediately, her ex-husband of 6 months. Despite their bitter divorce, he deserved to know that his daughter was missing. His reaction had been exactly what she expected. Explosive anger directed primarily at her. "You let a stranger watch our daughter?" he had shouted over the phone. "What the hell is wrong with you, Rachel? Can't you just be a good mother?" The police had searched David's house that evening as part of their standard procedure. They found nothing suspicious, and David had provided a solid alibi for his whereabouts that afternoon. The sound of the station's front door opening pulled Rachel from her dark thoughts. She looked up to see David Langford walk in, his face already flushed with familiar anger. His normally well-kept appearance was disheveled. His button-down shirt was wrinkled, and his hair stuck up as if he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly. Detective Hart had called him in, too, to wait for the surveillance update and review his statement once more. When David's eyes landed on Rachel, his expression hardened further. "This is your fault," he spat, not bothering with a greeting. "If anything happens to my daughter because of your negligence, I swear to God, Rachel, you'll never see her again, not if I have anything to say about it." Rachel felt a surge of anger cut through her grief. "Don't you dare threaten me, David. Not now." "Threatening? I'm stating facts. You left our daughter with a complete stranger?" "I was gone for 5 minutes to get her diaper bag," Rachel shot back, her voice rising. "And where were you?" "Oh, right. You were too busy with your important meeting to take Haley for the day like you were supposed to before you canceled last minute. Don't turn this around on me, and speaking of diarrhea, it was probably that cheap daycare food you feed her." "It wasn't the daycare food. It was that fruit pouch you sent over yesterday morning," Rachel countered. She was fine until she ate that in the afternoon after the daycare. David's face flushed deeper red. "That's ridiculous. I bought her favorite snack from the store. There was nothing wrong with it." He took a step toward Rachel, his hands balled into fists at his sides. Officer Diaz, who had been stationed at the front desk, quickly moved between them. "That's enough," Detective Hart's authoritative voice cut through the tension as he emerged from his office. "Both of you need to calm down. This isn't helping us find Haley." David took a deep breath, visibly trying to compose himself. "Fine. What's the latest? Have you found anything from the surveillance footage?" "We're still waiting on some results," Detective Hart replied. "Mr. Langford, I'd like to go over a few more details with you while we wait." "Make it quick," David said, checking his watch. "I have a meeting in an hour that I can't miss." Rachel stared at him incredulously. Their daughter was missing, and he was worried about a meeting? Before Detective Hart could respond, the desk phone rang. Officer Diaz answered it, his expression changing rapidly as he listened to the caller. Whatever news he was receiving, it wasn't good. The officer quickly put the caller on hold and approached Detective Hart, speaking in a hushed voice. Rachel stood up, her heart hammering against her ribs. Something had happened. Detective Hart's face grew grim as he listened. He nodded once, then turned to Rachel and David. "We've just received a call from a janitor at Everpine Park," he said, his voice steady and controlled. "He found something in the women's restroom you should know about." Rachel's legs nearly gave out beneath her. Did they—" She couldn't finish the question. "No, not Haley," Detective Hart quickly clarified. "But the janitor found a child-sized shirt and a soiled diaper inside a locked stall in the women's restroom. The shirt matches the description of what Haley was wearing when she disappeared. A red Elmo shirt, size 2T. Haley had been wearing it for 2 days straight because she refused to take it off." "I need to go there," Rachel said, already reaching for her purse. "I need to see it." "We will head over," Detective Hart replied. "You can come with us, but I need to prepare you." "I've received photos from the field team at the park," Detective Hart announced, holding up his phone. "Ms. Bennett, would you like to verify if these items belong to Haley?" Rachel nodded, standing on unsteady legs. Detective Hart showed her the screen. The image showed a small red T-shirt with Elmo's face prominently displayed on the front, laid out next to a soiled diaper. Both items were on the tile floor of what was clearly a public restroom. That's her shirt," Rachel confirmed, her voice barely above a whisper. "She was wearing it yesterday. She loves Elmo." A sob caught in her throat. "I need to go there. I need to see it in person." Detective Hart nodded. We'll go now. The forensics team is already processing the scene." "I can't go," David announced abruptly. "I told you I have that meeting, but I want to be kept updated on everything. Everything." He pointed a finger at Detective Hart. "You call me the second you know anything more." Without another word or even a glance at Rachel, David strode out of the station, leaving behind a wake of tension and the faint scent of expensive cologne. Rachel watched him go, a mixture of anger and disbelief coursing through her. How could he possibly prioritize a meeting over their missing daughter? But then again, that had always been David's way. Work first, family second. It was one of the many reasons their marriage had fallen apart. "Ms. Bennett?" Detective Hart's voice pulled her back to the present. "Are you ready to go?" Rachel nodded, squaring her shoulders and taking a deep breath. "Yes. Let's go find my daughter." The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Everpine Park as Detective Hart's unmarked police car pulled into the parking lot. The playground equipment stood eerily empty, cordoned off with yellow police tape that fluttered in the breeze. 2 police cruisers and a forensics van were already parked near the public restrooms. Rachel felt a surreal sense of déjà vu as she stepped out of the car. Just 48 hours ago, she'd been here with Haley, watching her daughter laugh as she pushed her on the swings. Now, the park felt like a crime scene, because it was. "This way, Ms. Bennett," Detective Hart said, guiding her toward the restrooms, where a small cluster of officers and forensics personnel had gathered. As they approached, Rachel could see evidence markers placed on the ground near the restroom entrance. A tall, thin man in a gray maintenance uniform stood off to the side, speaking with a female officer. He kept removing his cap and running a hand through his salt-and-pepper hair, his expression troubled. "That's Frankie Morales, the park janitor who found the items," Detective Hart explained quietly. "He's worked here for over 15 years. Rachel nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She watched as a forensics technician exited the restroom carrying 2 clear evidence bags. In one was Haley's red Elmo shirt, and in the other, the soiled diaper. Seeing the items up close made Rachel's heart clench painfully in her chest. "Ms. Bennett, this is Officer Chen from our forensics team," Detective Hart said as the technician approached. "She's been processing the evidence." Officer Chen, a petite woman with intelligent eyes and a gentle demeanor, nodded respectfully to Rachel. "We've done our preliminary examination of the items," she explained. "There's no apparent blood on either the shirt or diaper, which is a good sign." Rachel released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "What about, can you tell if someone hurt her?" "We won't know everything until we get these back to the lab," Officer Chen replied carefully. "But there are no immediate signs of trauma based on what we've found. The diaper appears to simply be soiled, consistent with your report of Haley having diarrhea." Detective Hart motioned to the janitor. "Mr. Morales, could you please tell Ms. Bennett what you told me about finding these items?" Frankie Morales approached, twisting his cap nervously in his hands. His weathered face was etched with concern. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry about your little girl. I've got grandkids myself, and I can't imagine." "Thank you," Rachel said softly. "Please, just tell me what you found." Frankie nodded, gathering himself. "I do my cleaning rounds 3 times a day here, morning, afternoon, and evening. This morning, when I went to clean the women's restroom, I noticed the last stall was locked. I knocked, but no one answered, so I figured it was just stuck. Happens sometimes with these old locks." He gestured toward the restroom. "This afternoon, same thing. Stall still locked, no one inside. I meant to bring my tools to fix it, but got called to handle a spill on the other side of the park. But just now, during my evening round, I decided to check if it was still stuck. When it was, I used my master key to open it, and that's when I found—" He trailed off, glancing at the evidence bags. "The shirt and diaper were just sitting there on the floor?" Rachel asked, trying to understand. "Yes, ma'am, right in front of the toilet. Looked like someone had just left them there." Detective Hart interjected, Mr. Morales immediately called 911, and our officers responded within minutes. "Could my daughter have been in there? Could someone have been keeping her locked in that stall?" Rachel asked, her mind racing with terrible possibilities. Officer Chen shook her head. "It's unlikely, Ms. Bennett. We've dusted the entire stall for fingerprints, and while we found partial prints on the lock mechanism, we found no child-sized prints anywhere in the stall, not on the walls, the toilet, or the floor where a child would likely have touched." "What does that mean?" Rachel asked, looking between the officer and detective. "It suggests that Haley wasn't physically in the restroom," Detective Hart explained gently. "Based on the position of the items and the lack of child fingerprints, it appears someone placed these items there deliberately." "But why? Why would someone take my daughter's clothes and soiled overnight diaper, then leave them in a bathroom stall?" Detective Hart's expression was grim. "It could be to mislead us, to distract our investigation, or send us in the wrong direction." Rachel felt her knees weaken as the implication hit her. This wasn't a case of Haley wandering off or getting briefly lost. Someone had intentionally taken her daughter and was now playing a calculated game with the evidence. "What about the dirt on the clothes?" the janitor asked, noticing smudges on the shirt through the clear evidence bag. "Haley's clothes were already dirty from playing in the playground that day," Rachel answered. Officer Chen nodded. "We'll analyze all the soil and stains in the lab. That might tell us if the shirt has been somewhere else since Haley was wearing it." As they spoke, another forensics technician emerged from the restroom, carrying a small evidence envelope. "Detective," the technician called, "we found a partial fingerprint on the stall door that doesn't match the janitor's or any of the prints we've collected from the park staff." Detective Hart's posture straightened with interest. "Good work. Get that back to the lab immediately for analysis. Priority 1. He turned back to Rachel. "We're going to continue processing this scene thoroughly, but I'd like to head back to the station now. We should be receiving updates on the park surveillance footage, and I want to review that with you as soon as possible." Rachel nodded, taking one last look at her daughter's shirt in the evidence bag. It seemed impossibly small and vulnerable, just like Haley. As they walked back toward the detective's car, Hart cleared his throat. "There's one more thing, Ms. Bennett. We need Haley's medical records and birth certificate for our database. It helps us with verification and in alerting hospitals in surrounding areas." Rachel stopped walking. "They're at David's house." "Your ex-husband has them?" "Yes, I dropped them off at his place a few months ago during a custody handover. He was supposed to make copies and return the originals to me, but despite my reminders, he never did." Rachel sighed with frustration. "I know exactly where they are. In the bottom drawer of the hallway cabinet, just past his front door." Detective Hart frowned slightly. "We can send an officer to pick them up." "No, it's okay," Rachel said, surprising herself with the offer. "I can get them. David's place isn't far." "I'm not sure that's a good idea, Ms. Bennett," Detective Hart said cautiously. "Given the tension between you two earlier—" "I'll be fast and careful," Rachel promised. "I won't get into any confrontation with him." Detective Hart studied her for a long moment, then reluctantly nodded. "All right, but please just get the documents and return to the station immediately, and call me if there's any problem at all." "I will," Rachel assured him, already calculating how quickly she could retrieve the documents and return. Every minute counted in finding Haley, and she wasn't going to waste a single one. As they got back into the detective's car, Rachel stared out at Everpine Park, a place that had once been filled with her daughter's laughter, but was now the starting point of a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Back at the police station, Rachel stood behind Detective Hart and a tech specialist as they reviewed the surveillance footage from Everpine Park. The monitor displayed a grainy black and white view of the parking lot near the playground. Detective Hart had explained that while the park's security system was outdated, they had managed to retrieve footage from the day Haley disappeared. "There," Rachel said, pointing at the screen. The timestamp read 3:42 p.m., approximately the time Haley had vanished. A woman carrying a girl in a red shirt was hurrying toward a sedan parked near the edge of the frame. A young boy, perhaps 6 or 7 years old, followed closely behind. That's her. That's Melissa. Detective Hart leaned forward, squinting at the screen. Can you zoom in on the vehicle? The tech specialist adjusted the footage, zooming in on the sedan as it pulled away from the parking spot. The angle's bad, he said, but we can make out part of the license plate. Rachel could see only half of the plate number before the car moved out of the camera's view. Run that partial through the DMV database, Detective Hart instructed. Cross-reference with sedan models matching this description. Already on it, the specialist replied, his fingers flying across the keyboard. It'll take some time to narrow down the results, but we should be able to get a list of possible matches. Rachel wrapped her arms around herself, fighting a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. Seeing the woman, Melissa, carrying her daughter away made everything terrifyingly real. She seemed so normal, Rachel whispered. So helpful. She said she was a kindergarten teacher. Detective Hart's expression remained professionally neutral, but his eyes softened with sympathy. Child abductors often present themselves as trustworthy. They know exactly what to say to gain a parent's confidence. The tech specialist turned from his computer. Detective, I've sent the partial plate information to the officers. They'll begin running it through the system. With the make and model, we should be able to narrow it down significantly. Good, Hart nodded. Issue an emergency BOLO with the vehicle description and send the woman's image from the footage to all patrol units. He turned to Rachel. While we're waiting for those results, it might be a good time for you to get those documents from your ex-husband's house. Rachel nodded, gathering her purse. I'll be as quick as I can. Do you need an officer to accompany you? Hart asked. No, I'll be fine, Rachel insisted. David should still be at his meeting, and I know exactly where the documents are. I'll just grab them and come straight back. Before leaving, Rachel signed several release forms that would allow the police to access Haley's medical information if needed. The bureaucratic process felt surreal, signing papers while her daughter was missing, but she understood the necessity. As she was about to leave, Detective Hart approached with a stern expression. Ms. Bennett, I know this is difficult, but I need to remind you, if you do encounter your ex-husband, do not engage in any confrontation. Just get the documents and return here immediately. I understand, Rachel said. She walked out to the parking lot where her car had been sitting since yesterday. The late afternoon sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the asphalt. As she slid into the driver's seat, she tried David's number one more time. The call went straight to voicemail. David, it's me. The police need Haley's medical records and birth certificate. I'm coming by to pick them up from your place. Call me back if you get this. She ended the call and started the engine, her mind racing. The police were tracking down Melissa, the woman who had taken Haley. Perhaps by the time she returned with the documents, they would have located her address. The thought gave Rachel a surge of hope as she pulled out of the police station parking lot. The drive to David's house would take about 15 minutes. 15 minutes closer to finding Haley, Rachel told herself. She had to believe that. As she drove, Rachel's thoughts drifted back to the surveillance footage. Something about Melissa had seemed so genuine, so trustworthy. How could she have been so wrong about someone? And why would a woman with her own child kidnap someone else's? None of it made sense. But then, nothing had made sense since the moment she'd returned to the playground to find Haley gone. Rachel turned onto the familiar street where David had bought a house after their divorce, a modern two-story in a quiet neighborhood that was nothing like the cozy craftsman they had shared during their marriage. As she approached his address, she rehearsed exactly what she would do: find the spare key, retrieve the documents from the hallway cabinet, and leave. Simple. Fast. No complications. Rachel pulled into David's driveway, immediately noticing his silver Audi parked there. Her heart sank. Despite his mention of a meeting, his car was still home. She briefly considered calling Detective Hart, but decided against it. She'd come this far, and the documents were too important to delay retrieving. She parked behind his car and sat for a moment, gathering her courage. Through the Audi's rear window, she could see several grocery bags in the back seat. Curious, she stepped out of her car and peered inside. The bags appeared full of supplies, though she couldn't make out specific items. Next to the bag sat David's personal suitcase, the expensive leather one he'd bought during their last anniversary trip, and a blue cooler box. Why would he have packed bags in his car? Rachel murmured to herself, a sense of unease growing in her stomach. She tried the car door, but it was locked. Stepping back, she pulled out her phone and dialed David's number again. This time, after several rings, he answered. "What do you want, Rachel?" His voice was terse, impatient. "I'm at your house. The police need Haley's medical records and birth certificate for their database. Remember? The ones in your hallway cabinet that you never returned to me?" There was a pause. "You shouldn't be at my house." "I wouldn't be if you'd returned her documents like I asked you to a dozen times," Rachel replied, struggling to keep her tone even. "The police need them now, David. This is important." Another long pause followed, then a heavy sigh. "Fine. There's a spare key under the stepping stone near the potted plants in the front yard." "Thank you," Rachel said, surprised by his sudden cooperation. "I'll just grab the documents and go." "See that you do," David replied coldly. "I don't appreciate you showing up at my house unannounced and going through my things." "I'm not," Rachel began, but David had already hung up. She pocketed her phone and walked to the front yard, scanning the stepping stones until she found one that wobbled slightly. Lifting it, she discovered a small magnetic key box hidden underneath. She removed the key and approached the front door, her heart racing despite her attempts to stay calm. The house was silent as she entered. The hallway was immaculate, so different from their family home that had always been cluttered with Haley's toys and the happy chaos of family life. This place felt sterile, impersonal, despite the 6 months David had lived here. Rachel went directly to the hallway cabinet, opening the bottom drawer. She found exactly what she was looking for, a manila envelope labeled "Haley Important Documents" in her own handwriting. She pulled it out and quickly verified the contents. Haley's birth certificate, medical records, Social Security card, and immunization history. Everything the police might need was there. With the envelope in hand, Rachel should have left immediately. That had been her promise to Detective Hart. But something felt off about the packed car, the suitcase, the cooler. Why would David have those items ready if he was just going to a meeting? Against her better judgment, she found herself walking through the house, scanning for any sign that might indicate where Haley could be. The living room was sparsely furnished with a leather couch and a large television. The kitchen was spotless, no dishes in the sink, no sign of recent cooking. It looked like a model home rather than a place someone actually lived. As she passed the master bedroom, she noticed the door was ajar. A sliver of her conscience warned her to turn around and leave, but a stronger instinct, a mother's instinct, pushed her forward. The bedroom was as meticulously kept as the rest of the house, the king-sized bed perfectly made with crisp navy sheets. But what caught Rachel's eye was on the dresser, a gift wrapped in blue paper decorated with colorful cars and ships, the kind of wrapping paper you'd use for a young boy's present. Beside it sat a woman's hair clip, tortoiseshell and delicate, definitely not something that belonged to David. Rachel froze, staring at these items that seemed so out of place in her ex-husband's sterile bedroom. Who was the gift for, and whose hair clip was that? A chill ran down her spine at the thought of David possibly having a girlfriend or someone helping him. He had never mentioned anyone, not to the police when they questioned him yesterday, not to mutual friends, not even to family. Rachel took out her phone and snapped photos of both the wrapped gift and the hair clip. Then, careful not to touch the clip directly, she went to the kitchen and found a clean dish towel. Using it to pick up the hair clip, she placed it in a Ziploc sandwich bag she found in a drawer. "Might be useful," she whispered to herself, sealing the bag. Her heart hammered in her chest as she turned off the lights, closed the doors she had opened, and made her way back to the front entrance. She locked the door behind her and returned the spare key to its hiding place, trying to leave everything exactly as she had found it. Back in her car, Rachel took a deep breath, clutching the manila envelope and the sandwich bag containing the hair clip. She needed to get back to the police station immediately. Whatever connection David had to this new woman, Detective Hart needed to know. She started her engine and began to back out of the driveway when her phone rang. It was David again. "Are you still at my house?" His voice was tight, controlled. "I'm just leaving," Rachel replied, trying to sound casual. "I got what I needed. I'm heading back to the station now." "Good. Don't come back here again without my permission." There was an edge to his voice that made her skin crawl. "I won't," she promised, ending the call. As she drove away from David's house, her mind was racing. The packed car, the suitcase, the gift for a boy, the woman's hair clip. None of it made sense individually, but together they painted a disturbing picture. She had driven only a few houses down when she noticed a taxi coming from the opposite direction. She didn't think much of it until she glanced in her rearview mirror and saw the taxi's brake lights illuminate as it stopped in front of David's house. Rachel slowed her car and pulled over to a discreet spot, watching as a woman stepped out of the taxi. Even from a distance, she could make out the leather jacket, a hijab covering her hair, and large sunglasses that hid most of her face. "Who is that?" Rachel whispered, pulling over to the curb several houses down. From her vantage point, she watched as the taxi driver opened the trunk and removed a large, bulky box. He helped the woman carry it to the driveway, setting it down near David's Audi. The woman paid the driver, and the taxi pulled away. Rachel's curiosity overpowered her caution. She turned off her engine and sank lower in her seat, watching the mysterious woman through her side mirror. David had never mentioned any Muslim friends or family members. Who was this woman, and why was she at his house with a large package? The answer came a moment later when the woman reached into her purse, pulled out a key, and unlocked David's front door, as if she'd done it 1,000 times before. Rachel remained perfectly still in her car, heart pounding as she watched the woman enter David's house. This wasn't just any visitor. This woman had her own key. The strangeness of the situation kept Rachel rooted to her spot, despite knowing she should be heading back to the police station with Haley's documents. "What is going on here?" she whispered to herself, adjusting her side mirror for a better view. The woman stayed inside the house for several minutes. Rachel used this time to quickly note down the taxi's license plate number before it disappeared around the corner. Something told her this information might be important. Just as Rachel was debating whether to call Detective Hart, the front door opened again. The woman emerged carrying a duffel bag that appeared fully packed, along with the blue wrapped gift Rachel had seen on David's dresser. The head coverings and large sunglasses still obscured most of her face, making it impossible for Rachel to identify her clearly in the dimming evening light. What happened next left Rachel speechless. The woman reached into her purse, pulled out a car key, presumably to David's Audi, and clicked the unlock button. The car's lights flashed in response. "She has his car key too?" Rachel murmured incredulously. Her ex-husband had never mentioned having a new girlfriend, let alone one who had access to both his house and his precious Audi that he barely let Rachel drive during their marriage. The woman loaded the duffel bag and gift into the back seat of the car. Then she returned to the large box the taxi driver had helped her place in the driveway. Pulling what looked like a box cutter from her pocket, likely taken from the house, she methodically sliced through the packaging tape. Rachel squinted, trying to make out what was inside as the woman opened the flaps. Her breath caught when she realized what it was: a brand-new baby car seat. With practiced efficiency, the woman removed the car seat from its packaging and installed it in the back seat of David's car. The entire process took only a few minutes, suggesting she was familiar with the task. "A car seat?" Rachel whispered, confusion tightening into dread. David had never mentioned having another child. Could it be for the woman's son? As Rachel watched, a terrible thought took hold. What if this wasn't just about a new girlfriend? Melissa had a boy who looked around 7. Was it possible her husband was involved with her? The suitcase in his car, the grocery bags, the cooler box, it all pointed to someone preparing for a trip. And now this woman was quietly installing a car seat in his vehicle. If Rachel's darkest suspicion was true, then this woman had to be Melissa. Still, something didn't quite add up. She didn't look like the woman Rachel had sat with at the playground yesterday. Her appearance was different enough to raise doubt, but not enough to rule it out entirely. Rachel's fingers hovered over her phone, ready to call Detective Hart, but she hesitated. What if she was jumping to conclusions? What if this were all an innocent coincidence? Her doubt evaporated as she watched the woman climb into the driver's seat of David's Audi and start the engine. This wasn't just a visit, she was taking his car somewhere, and with a newly installed car seat. The Audi's headlights came on, illuminating the darkening street as the woman backed out of the driveway. Without thinking, Rachel started her own car. She couldn't let this woman drive away, not when every instinct told her this was connected to Haley. As the Audi pulled away from the curb, Rachel made her decision. She would follow at a safe distance, see where this mysterious woman was going. Only then would she call Detective Hart with concrete information rather than mere suspicions of her ex-husband's personal life. She waited until the Audi was half a block ahead before pulling away from the curb and following. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white with tension. The documents she'd come for lay forgotten on the passenger seat beside her, along with the bagged hair clip. The rational part of her brain argued that she should return to the police station as promised. But the stronger part, the mother desperate to find her daughter, pushed her forward, following the taillights of David's car as it moved through the quiet residential streets. "Where are you going?" Rachel whispered, maintaining a careful distance. "And do you have anything to do with my daughter?" Rachel kept a careful distance behind David's Audi as it wound through the residential streets of Sequim. The mysterious woman was driving with purpose, clearly familiar with the route. As they reached a main road, the Audi turned east, away from the town center and toward the outskirts. With one eye on the road and the other on the taillights ahead, Rachel fumbled for her phone and dialed Detective Hart's number. He answered on the second ring. "Ms. Bennett, did you get the documents?" "Yes, I got them," Rachel replied, keeping her voice low despite being alone in her car. "But something's happening. There's a woman at David's house. She has her own key to his place and his car. She just put a brand new car seat in his Audi, and now she's driving away with a packed duffel bag." There was a brief pause on the line. "Are you following her?" Detective Hart's voice had shifted to a sharper tone. "Yes," Rachel admitted. "I know you told me to come straight back, but Detective, she had a key to David's house, and there was a suitcase and cooler in his car earlier, like he was planning to go somewhere." She heard the detective exhale heavily. "Ms. Bennett, I understand your concern, but following someone could be dangerous. Are you in any immediate danger right now?" Rachel checked her mirrors. The woman showed no sign of having noticed her. "No, I don't think so. I'm keeping my distance. I have this feeling. When I was at David's house, I found a wrapped gift for a young boy and a woman's hair clip in his bedroom. I know it might sound like a stretch, but I can't shake the feeling there's some connection between David and the woman who took Haley. She has a boy." "That's a serious allegation," Detective Hart said carefully. "We need evidence before—" "Did you find anything from the license plate number?" Rachel interrupted, her anxiety making her impatient. "Actually, yes," Hart replied, his tone becoming more professional. We identified a vehicle registered to a Melissa Crane that matches the partial plate and car model from the surveillance footage. Officers were dispatched to her address, but the house appears vacant. No one's there, and neighbors say they haven't seen her in a few days. Rachel's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Melissa Crane? That's her full name? Yes, we've issued an emergency BOLO for her and informed authorities in surrounding towns, gas stations, and transportation hubs. As they spoke, Rachel noticed they were heading onto a familiar road, one that led away from town and into the more rural outskirts where properties were spread farther apart. "Wait," she said, a memory surfacing. "I know where we're going. David has an old friend who owns a vacation cottage out this way. We visited once, years ago, during our marriage. Last I heard, the friend had moved overseas and was renting the property out." "Do you remember the address?" Detective Hart asked, his voice now urgent. "Not exactly, but it's on Evergreen Lane, I think. It's isolated, the only cottage at the end of a long driveway set back from the road." "Ms. Bennett," Detective Hart's voice was serious, "I have more information you need to know. The forensics team got a preliminary match on the partial fingerprint from the bathroom stall. It matches Melissa Crane's prints from a background check she underwent for her teaching license." Rachel's breath caught. "So she is the one who left Haley's clothes in the bathroom?" "It appears that way. She's now our primary suspect, and we're treating this as a confirmed abduction case." Rachel watched as the Audi slowed and turned onto a narrow, tree-lined lane. "Detective, we're turning onto what I think is Evergreen Lane now. The cottage should be at the end." "I'm sending units to your location immediately," Hart said. "But Rachel, listen to me carefully. Do not approach this woman or the cottage. She's now a wanted suspect in a child abduction case. If your ex-husband is involved, the situation could be volatile." "I understand," Rachel said, though her entire being ached to rush to the cottage and search for Haley. "I'm going to try to reach your ex-husband and inform him about Melissa Crane," Hart continued. "In the meantime, stay on the line with me. Find a safe spot and wait for our officers. Or better yet, come back to town." Rachel slowed her car as the Audi approached the end of the lane. Just as she remembered, a rustic cottage stood alone, partially obscured by tall pine trees. The nearest neighboring house was at least a quarter-mile away. She pulled over onto a small dirt turnout, partially hidden by bushes, about 100 yards from the cottage's driveway. From this vantage point, she could see the Audi parked in front of the cottage, its headlights now off. "I'm parked safely," Rachel whispered into the phone. "I can see David's car in front of the cottage." "Good. Stay where you are. Units are on their way. Your location is showing on our GPS." Rachel watched as the woman stepped out of the car, carrying only the cooler box from the back seat. She walked confidently to the front porch and unlocked the door. As she stepped onto the porch, illuminated by the porch light, she removed her leather jacket, sunglasses, and scarf covering over her head. Though Rachel couldn't make out her features clearly from this distance, the woman's silhouette and movements were familiar. The same confident posture of the woman who had offered to watch Haley at the park. Rachel saw movement at the cottage door. A young boy, perhaps 7 years old, rushed out onto the porch and threw his arms around Melissa's waist. Rachel recognized him immediately as the same boy she'd seen playing on the monkey bars at the park. "It's her," Rachel whispered. "It's Melissa. Her son is there too," she reported, her voice trembling. But it was what happened next that made Rachel's world stop. From inside the cottage came a familiar sound, a whining cry that Rachel would recognize anywhere. A moment later, a small figure appeared in the doorway, toddling out onto the porch. Haley. Her daughter was wearing different clothes than when Rachel had last seen her, but there was no mistaking the way she moved, the shape of her tiny body, the tousled dark hair. "Oh my God," Rachel gasped, tears instantly filling her eyes. "Detective, Haley's there." "I can see her. She's at the cottage." Melissa quickly scooped Haley up with one arm and corralled her son with the other, ushering both children back inside the cottage. The door closed behind them, and the porch light went out a moment later. "Are you absolutely certain it's Haley?" Detective Hart demanded, his voice tense. "Yes," Rachel choked out, tears now streaming down her face. "I'd know my daughter anywhere. It's her, Detective. She's alive. She's in there." "Ms. Bennett, I need you to stay calm and stay in your vehicle. Do not approach the cottage. Do you understand? The situation could be dangerous." Rachel wiped at her tears, trying to compose herself. "I understand. I'll stay here. Just hurry, please." As they spoke, Rachel noticed another set of headlights turning onto Evergreen Lane, a black sedan. She held her breath as it pulled up to the cottage. The back door opened, and a familiar figure stepped out. David. He was carrying what looked like a brown document envelope and wearing the same clothes he'd had on at the police station earlier. He paid the taxi driver, and the cab pulled away, leaving him standing in front of the cottage. Without hesitation, he walked to the front door and entered without knocking. "Detective," Rachel said, her voice shaking with a mixture of shock and rage. "David just arrived in a taxi. He went inside the cottage. He has a key, too." There was a brief silence on the line. When Detective Hart spoke again, his voice was deadly serious. "Ms. Bennett, this confirms our suspicion that your ex-husband may be involved in Haley's abduction. Our units are 15 minutes out. I need you to stay exactly where you are. The situation is now considered high risk." Rachel clutched the phone tightly, her eyes fixed on the cottage where her daughter was being held, by her own father and a woman who had expertly gained Rachel's trust only to betray it in the most devastating way possible. "They're going to try to take her away, aren't they?" Rachel whispered, a terrible realization dawning on her. "The car seat, the packed bags, the documents David was carrying, they're planning to leave with her." "We won't let that happen," Detective Hart promised. "Just stay on the line with me." Rachel sat frozen in her car, watching the cottage with an intensity that made her eyes burn. Less than 5 minutes had passed since David entered, but it felt like an eternity. The knowledge that her daughter was just 100 yards away, yet still out of reach, was almost unbearable. The cottage door suddenly opened. Rachel held her breath as David emerged, carrying Haley in his arms. The little girl looked drowsy, her head resting on her father's shoulder. Behind them came Melissa, holding the cooler box in one hand while guiding her son with the other. She was also carrying what looked like a children's suitcase. "They're coming out," Rachel hissed into the phone. "All of them. They're leaving." "Can you still see Haley clearly?" Hart asked. "Yes, David's carrying her. She looks tired, sleepy. It's her usual bedtime, so that makes sense. She's alive." Rachel's voice broke on the last word. She watched as David settled Haley into the newly installed car seat, while Melissa helped her son into the other side of the back seat. They moved with practiced efficiency, like a family that had done this routine 100 times before. "They're getting in the car," Rachel reported, her heart racing. "They're switching off the lights in the cottage. They're locking up. Detective, they're leaving right now." "Ms. Bennett, stay calm," Hart ordered. "Our units are almost there. Do not, I repeat, do not follow them if they leave before our officers arrive." But as Rachel watched David slide into the driver's seat and start the engine, she knew she couldn't risk losing sight of them. What if they took some back road the police didn't know about? What if they disappeared with Haley before the officers could intercept them? "I'm sorry, Detective," Rachel said, her resolve hardening. "I can't let them get away. I'll keep my distance, but I have to follow them. I have to make sure Haley doesn't disappear again." "Rachel," Hart began, but she cut him off. "I'll keep the line open. You can track my phone. Just tell your officers to hurry." Before he could protest further, Rachel started her engine. She waited until David's Audi had pulled away from the cottage and started down the lane before she followed, keeping her headlights off until they reached the main road. "They're heading east on Evergreen Road," she reported, maintaining a careful distance behind the Audi. "David's driving fast, like he's in a hurry." "I've updated our units," Hart replied, his tone resigned but professional. "They're redirecting to intercept. Rachel, I understand why you're doing this, but please be careful. If they spot you following them, the situation could escalate." "I know," Rachel said, her eyes fixed on the taillights ahead. "I'll stay back. I just need to know where they're taking her." For the next 10 minutes, Rachel followed David's car as it wound through increasingly unfamiliar roads. They were heading away from Sequim, taking routes that suggested David was avoiding the main highways. "We're approaching Port Angeles," Rachel said, recognizing the outskirts of the neighboring town. "Detective, I think they might be heading for the harbor." "The harbor?" Hart repeated. "Why would they wait? The Coho ferry to Victoria leaves from Port Angeles around this hour." Rachel's stomach dropped. "They're trying to leave the country, Canada. They're going to take Haley to Canada." "I'm alerting the Port Angeles Police and Border Patrol now," Hart said, his voice taking on new urgency. "The ferry terminal will be their bottleneck. They'll need to present documents there." David was carrying an envelope when he arrived at the cottage, Rachel remembered. Could those be fake documents for crossing the border? "It's possible," Hart admitted. "Stay on their tail, but maintain your distance. Our units are converging on the ferry terminal now." The Audi continued toward Port Angeles, eventually turning onto a road that led directly to the waterfront. As they approached the ferry terminal, Rachel could see the large vessel docked at the pier, the MV Coho, which made daily runs between Port Angeles and Victoria, British Columbia. "They're pulling into the ferry terminal parking lot," Rachel reported, her heart hammering in her chest. "The ferry looks like it's still boarding." "Perfect," Hart replied. "Port Angeles PD and our units are in position. They won't make it onto that ferry. Rachel, I need you to stay back now. Pull over and let our officers handle this." Rachel obediently pulled her car to the side of the road, about 100 yards from the terminal entrance. From this vantage point, she could see David park the Audi in the short-term lot. He quickly got out and opened the rear door to unbuckle Haley, while Melissa did the same for her son. "They're heading for the terminal entrance," Rachel whispered, though she knew Hart could probably hear the police radio chatter reporting the same information. What happened next unfolded with startling speed. As David and Melissa approached the terminal doors, several police cruisers converged from different directions, lights flashing, but sirens silent. Officers emerged with weapons drawn, forming a semicircle around the couple and children. "Police! Freeze! Put your hands in the air!" The commands echoed across the parking lot, clear even from Rachel's position. David and Melissa froze, shock evident in their postures. Slowly, they raised their hands. Haley, startled by the sudden commotion, began to cry. Melissa's son clutched his mother's leg, his small face crumpling in fear. "They've got them," Rachel breathed, already unbuckling her seatbelt. "Detective, they've got them." "Stay in your car until an officer comes for you," Hart instructed, but Rachel was barely listening. She watched as officers approached David and Melissa cautiously, securing their wrists with handcuffs, while other officers gently separated the children from the adults. Unable to wait any longer, Rachel flung open her car door and ran toward the scene, her entire focus on the small figure in a pink sweater being held by a female officer. "Haley!" she called, her voice breaking. "Haley!" The little girl's head snapped up at the sound of her mother's voice. "Mama!" she cried, struggling in the officer's arms, reaching toward Rachel. A uniformed officer stepped into Rachel's path, but Detective Hart's voice crackled over the radio at his hip. "Let her through. That's the mother." The officer nodded and stepped aside, allowing Rachel to rush forward. The female officer gently set Haley down, and the toddler ran on unsteady legs toward her mother. Rachel dropped to her knees, engulfing her daughter in a fierce embrace. Haley's small arms wrapped around her neck, holding on with surprising strength. "Mama cry," Haley said, patting Rachel's wet cheek with a chubby hand. "Yes, baby. Mama's crying because she's so happy to see you," Rachel choked out, pressing kisses to her daughter's hair, face, and hands, reassuring herself that Haley was real and solid and alive. As she held her daughter, Rachel looked up to see David and Melissa being led toward separate police cars. David's eyes met hers briefly, a mixture of rage and defeat in his expression. He spat on the ground as he passed, his face contorted with anger. "You don't deserve her," he snarled. "She deserves a real family, a complete family, something I could give her that you couldn't." "Move along," an officer ordered, guiding David firmly toward the waiting cruiser. Rachel turned away, focusing her attention back on Haley. Now that the initial shock of reunion was fading, she could see that her daughter looked tired. Her voice sounded hoarse, and she coughed several times as Rachel held her. A paramedic approached them, crouching down to Haley's level. "Hi there, sweetheart. My name's Sarah. Is it okay if I check to make sure you're feeling all right?" Haley clung tighter to Rachel, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. "It's okay, baby," Rachel soothed. "Sarah just wants to help make sure you're not sick." The paramedic smiled reassuringly. "I'll be quick, I promise. You can stay right in your mommy's arms." As the paramedic began a gentle examination, Rachel noticed Melissa's son standing alone near a police car, tears streaming down his face as he watched his mother being driven away. The boy looked lost and terrified, clutching a small toy car in his trembling hand. "What about my mom?" he asked a nearby officer, his voice small and broken. "Where is she going? When can I go with her?" The officer knelt beside him, speaking in a gentle tone that Rachel couldn't quite hear. The boy's face crumpled further. "But I don't want to go with strangers," he cried. "I want my mom, and Haley. Mom promised me a sister for a long time, and Haley is nice. We played together. I don't want to lose my sister, too." Rachel's heart twisted at the boy's words. Despite everything Melissa had done, her son was an innocent victim in all this, a child who'd been dragged into his mother's terrible choices. The paramedic finished her preliminary examination of Haley and straightened up. "She seems okay overall, but she's a bit dehydrated and has a slight fever. The cough and hoarse voice are probably from crying and stress. I'd recommend a full checkup at the hospital, but there's no immediate medical concern." "Thank you," Rachel said, holding Haley closer. Detective Hart approached, his expression a mixture of relief and professional detachment. "Ms. Bennett, I'm glad you've been reunited with your daughter. We'll need statements from both of you, but that can wait until tomorrow if needed." Rachel nodded. "What happens now?" "We're processing the scene and gathering evidence. A forensics team is already searching the vehicle." He gestured toward David's Audi, where technicians in gloves were carefully removing items and placing them in evidence bags. "We've found the suitcases, grocery bags, cooler, a wrapped gift, and the new car seat, just as you described." Rachel remembered the hair clip she'd taken from David's bedroom. "I have something else, too." She reached into her pocket and produced the sandwich bag containing the clip. "I found this on David's dresser. I think it might belong to Melissa." Hart accepted the bag, examining the clip through the plastic. "Good thinking. This could help establish their connection." He looked back at Rachel. "We've also recovered documents from the envelope your ex-husband was carrying. They appear to be falsified identification papers and travel documents for all four of them, made to present them as a family traveling together. There's also a false consent form, signed with your name and a forged signature." Rachel's stomach churned. "So they planned to pretend I had consented to Haley leaving the country?" "It seems that way," Hart confirmed. "The documents are sophisticated forgeries. This wasn't an impulsive act. It was carefully planned." Rachel looked over at Melissa's son, who now sat on the curb, a social worker attempting to comfort him without much success. The boy's small shoulders shook with sobs. "What will happen to him?" she asked quietly. Child Protective Services will take temporary custody while they locate any family members who might be able to care for him, Hart explained. If there are none, he'll be placed in emergency foster care. Rachel nodded, her eyes still on the distraught child. Despite everything his mother had done, she couldn't help but feel compassion for the boy who had just lost everything familiar in his world. An officer approached Detective Hart with an update, and Rachel turned her attention back to Haley, who had begun to doze against her shoulder, exhausted from the ordeal. She pressed a gentle kiss to her daughter's forehead, overwhelmed with gratitude to have her back in her arms. But as she held her daughter close, she couldn't shake the image of the little boy sitting alone on the curb, his world shattered by the actions of adults who should have protected him. The fluorescent lights of the Sequim Police Department seemed harsher than Rachel remembered as she sat in the interview room, Haley asleep in her lap. The fever had finally broken after the nurse at the station treated her. After the commotion at the ferry terminal, they had been escorted back to the station, Rachel, Haley, and Melissa's son, who had been placed in the temporary care of a CPS worker named Andrea. Detective Hart sat across from Rachel, a digital recorder placed on the table between them. Despite the late hour, the station hummed with activity as officers processed the evidence and prepared charges against David and Melissa. "I know you're exhausted," Hart said, his voice gentle, "but I need to get your formal statement." Rachel nodded, absently stroking Haley's hair. "I understand." For the next 30 minutes, Rachel recounted everything that had happened since she arrived at David's house to retrieve the documents. "Looking back," she concluded, "I should have called you immediately when I saw the woman at David's house. But part of me couldn't believe he would be involved in Haley's disappearance. Despite everything, he's her father." Detective Hart nodded thoughtfully. "People are capable of surprising actions when they believe they're justified." He glanced down at his notes. "In this case, your instincts were correct. If you hadn't followed them, they might have made it onto that ferry, and recovering Haley would have become much more complicated." A knock at the door interrupted them. Officer Chen entered, carrying a folder. "Detective, we have updates from the field teams." Hart gestured for her to continue. Officer Chen opened the folder and consulted her notes. "The team at Melissa Crane's residence reports the house appears to have been vacant for at least 2 weeks. Mail was piled up, and neighbors confirm they haven't seen her recently. We found her personal items in David Langford's car trunk, suggesting she'd been staying elsewhere." Rachel thought of the hair clip she'd found on David's dresser. She was staying with David, wasn't she? Hart nodded. "It appears so. The team searching his house found women's personal items in the bathroom trash bin." Officer Chen continued. "At the cottage, we found a bedroom set up specifically for children. Toys, snacks, juice boxes, and water bottles were scattered around. The room wasn't locked, but it was clearly where the children had been spending their time." "They just left them there alone?" Rachel asked, horrified at the thought of Haley being abandoned in a strange place. "It seems Melissa let her son to keep an eye on Haley," Hart explained. "Based on our initial interviews with the boy, they were alone at the cottage for several hours today, while Melissa and David finalized their departure plans." Rachel tightened her arms around Haley, who stirred slightly but didn't wake. "That cottage belonged to David's friend, a man named Greg, something. I can't remember his last name. He moved overseas years ago. David did some handyman work there occasionally." "That's consistent with what we found," Officer Chen confirmed. "The property is registered to a Gregory Walsh, currently residing in Australia. The locks had been recently changed, and we found evidence suggesting your ex-husband had been using the property without the owner's knowledge." Detective Hart thanked Officer Chen, who left the room. He turned back to Rachel. "We've been able to piece together their plan based on the evidence and preliminary questioning," he said. "It appears David and Melissa met in an online parenting forum about 6 months ago, around the time of your divorce. From what we've found in their message history, he convinced her to help him reunite a father and daughter in exchange for money, companionship, and the promise of being a perfect family." Rachel's stomach twisted. And she agreed to kidnap a child for him? Just like that? People's motivations can be complex, Hart said carefully. From what we can tell, Melissa is a single mother who was struggling financially. Her son had apparently been asking for a sibling, and David offered her what seemed like a solution to multiple problems. So they planned this together, Rachel said, the full weight of the betrayal settling on her shoulders. David knew my routine with Haley, that I often left the diaper bag in the car during short trips to the park because I was potty training her and only used the pull-up diapers as a backup. Hart nodded. The morning of the abduction, David delivered what he called a care package to your door, correct? Yes, Rachel confirmed. There were toys and snacks, including those fruit pouches she loves. We believe he tampered with the fruit pouch to induce Haley's stomach upset, Hart explained. Our lab is still testing it, but the timing suggests it was deliberate. Once Haley had diarrhea, they knew you'd need to get her diaper bag, creating the opportunity for Melissa to take her. And then they planted her clothes in the bathroom to throw off the investigation, Rachel concluded, anger building inside her, while they prepared to leave the country with my daughter. Exactly. The paperwork we recovered shows they planned to take the ferry to Victoria and then fly from Canada to Belize, where David had rented a remote property under an alias. By the time we tracked them internationally, they would have been established with new identities in a country with complicated extradition procedures. Rachel shook her head, trying to process the methodical cruelty of the plan. But why? Why would David do this? Hart's expression was grave. Based on our initial interview with him, he was deeply resentful about the custody arrangement. He blamed you for turning Haley against him and believed he deserved full custody. The court denied him unsupervised visitation because he was emotionally abusive, Rachel said quietly. He would manipulate her, make her cry, and then blame me for poisoning her against him. The judge saw through it. People like your ex-husband rarely accept responsibility for their actions, Hart observed. In his mind, taking Haley was justified. He was rescuing her from you. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Andrea, the CPS worker, peered in. Sorry to interrupt, but I thought you should know. The boy is asking for Haley. He's quite upset and keeps saying she's his sister now. Rachel glanced down at her sleeping daughter, then back at Andrea. What's going to happen to him? We're trying to locate any family members who might be able to take him, Andrea explained. His name is Tyler. He's 7. So far, we haven't found any relatives willing or able to take custody. His father isn't in the picture, and his maternal grandparents are both deceased. So he'll go into foster care? Rachel asked. Andrea nodded soberly. Most likely, yes. Emergency placement first, then a more permanent arrangement if no family comes forward. Rachel felt a deep ache in her chest for the little boy who had lost everything in one terrible night. He was as much a victim in this as Haley was, an innocent child caught in the web of adult deception. Could I talk to him? Rachel asked, surprising herself. Detective Hart and Andrea exchanged glances. I don't see why not, Andrea said carefully. It might actually help him to see that Haley is okay. Rachel gently shifted Haley in her arms and stood. I'd like to see him then. They walked to a small break room that had been converted into a temporary waiting area for Tyler. The boy sat at a table with a half-eaten sandwich and an untouched apple in front of him. His eyes were red-rimmed from crying, and he clutched the same toy car Rachel had seen him holding at the ferry terminal. When the door opened, Tyler looked up hopefully, but his expression fell when he saw Andrea return with strangers. Tyler, Andrea said gently. This is Ms. Bennett. She's Haley's mom. Tyler's eyes widened, his gaze fixing on the sleeping toddler in Rachel's arms. Is Haley okay? He asked in a small voice. She's okay, Rachel assured him, taking a seat across from him. She's just very tired. Tyler nodded solemnly. I tried to take care of her like Mom said. I gave her juice when she was thirsty and helped her when she needed the bathroom. Rachel felt a lump form in her throat. That was very kind of you, Tyler. You were a good friend to Haley. Mom said we were going to be a family, Tyler said, his lower lip trembling. She said Haley would be my sister, and we would live in a new place with a beach, and that David would be my new dad. He looked up at Rachel, confusion and hurt in his eyes. But the police took Mom away? Did she do something bad? Rachel exchanged a glance with Andrea, who nodded encouragingly. Tyler, Rachel began carefully, your mom made some mistakes. She took Haley without asking me, and that's not allowed. But David said it was okay, Tyler protested. David isn't allowed to make that decision by himself, Rachel explained. Haley needs to live with me, just like you need to live with your mom. But right now, your mom needs to talk to the police about the mistakes she made. Tyler's small shoulders slumped. So where do I go now? Andrea said, I can't go home. The boy's desolation tore at Rachel's heart. In that moment, a certainty formed within her, a decision that felt right despite its suddenness. Detective, Rachel said, turning to Hart, who stood quietly by the door, would it be possible for Tyler to stay with me temporarily, at least until a more permanent arrangement is made? Hart raised his eyebrows in surprise. That's not typically how these situations are handled, Miss Bennett. There are procedures for emergency foster placement. I understand, Rachel said, but Tyler has been through so much. He's formed a bond with Haley. Separating them now, sending him to strangers. It seems cruel. It's not that simple, Andrea interjected gently. There are background checks, home inspections, approvals needed. But those things can be expedited, can't they? Rachel pressed. I have a stable job, a safe home. I've been vetted during the custody proceedings with David. All those records should be available. Hart and Andrea exchanged another look, a silent communication passing between them. It might be possible, Andrea conceded. If Melissa were to consent to a temporary guardianship arrangement, it could speed things up considerably. Could I speak with her? Rachel asked. Hart hesitated. She's currently being processed and interviewed. But I suppose a brief conversation could be arranged if she's willing. An hour later, Rachel found herself sitting across from Melissa Crane in a small, sterile interview room. The woman who had seemed so trustworthy and maternal at the park now looked diminished, her eyes red from crying, her hands fidgeting nervously on the table. Why did you want to see me? Melissa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rachel took a deep breath. I wanted to ask about Tyler. At the mention of her son's name, Melissa's composure cracked. Is he okay? They won't tell me where they've taken him. He's scared and confused, Rachel replied honestly. He misses you? Tears spilled down Melissa's cheeks. I never meant for him to get hurt. I thought... She broke off, shaking her head. It doesn't matter what I thought. I've ruined everything. Tyler told me you promised him a sister, Rachel said, that you and David were going to be a perfect family. Melissa nodded miserably. David found me on a single parents forum. He seemed so charming, so understanding about the struggles of raising a child alone. When he told me about how you were keeping his daughter from him, how all he wanted was to give her a complete family. She trailed off, shame evident in her downcast eyes. You believed him, Rachel finished for her. I wanted to believe him, Melissa corrected. Tyler has been asking for a sibling since he was 3. His father left before he was born, and I've been trying to give him everything on my own. When David offered me a chance at a ready-made family, financial security, a fresh start. She shook her head again. I know it doesn't excuse what I did. I've committed a terrible crime, and I'll pay for it. Rachel studied the woman across from her for a moment. When I saw you at David's house today, you were wearing a covering and sunglasses. Why the disguise? Melissa's face flushed with shame. I'm not Muslim. That was David's idea. He was paranoid about someone recognizing me if I went to his house. He bought me the head covering and told me never to show my face in his neighborhood, only to take it off once I reached the cottage. And David's car was at his house when he claimed to be at a meeting, Rachel continued. Was that part of the plan too? Melissa nodded. The meeting was with the people who forged our documents. They picked him up in their car. David said they insisted on it so he wouldn't know where their operation was based. She looked up at Rachel, her eyes haunted. But you still chose to take my daughter, Rachel said, her voice firm but not unkind. Yes, Melissa whispered. I did, and I'll never forgive myself for that. Rachel took a deep breath. I came here to ask your permission for something. Melissa looked up, confusion in her tear-stained face. I'd like to take Tyler in while you deal with the legal consequences of what's happened, Rachel said. Not permanently, but as a temporary guardian until a more permanent arrangement can be made. Melissa's eyes widened in shock. You want to take care of my son after what I did to you, to your daughter? Your mistake shouldn't ruin Tyler's life, Rachel said firmly. He's innocent in all this. He cares about Haley, and tearing them apart now would only cause more trauma for both children. Melissa stared at Rachel, bewilderment giving way to something like hope. You would do that for him? For us? I would do it for Tyler, Rachel clarified. And yes, indirectly for you too. Every child deserves to be loved and cared for, regardless of their parents' mistakes. Tears flowed freely down Melissa's face now. I don't deserve your kindness. This isn't about what you deserve, Rachel said. It's about what Tyler needs. Melissa nodded, wiping at her tears with the back of her hand. Yes, she whispered. If they'll allow it, yes. Please take care of my boy. 2 hours later, after a flurry of paperwork and preliminary approvals, Rachel found herself driving home with 2 sleeping children in the back seat of her car. Haley was secured in her car seat, and beside her, Tyler dozed with his head against the window, his toy car still clutched in his small hand. As Rachel drove through the quiet streets of Sequim, the weight of the past 3 days pressed upon her, yet alongside the lingering fear and anger was something new, a sense of purpose, of rightness in her decision to help Tyler. The world was not always kind or fair. People made terrible choices for complex reasons. Justice would be served. David and Melissa would face the consequences of their actions. But mercy could coexist with justice, Rachel believed, and sometimes, from the darkest circumstances, unexpected light could emerge. She glanced in the rearview mirror at the 2 children, one her daughter by birth, the other now temporarily in her care by choice. Both innocent, both deserving of security and love. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be more interviews, legal proceedings, adjustments to their suddenly expanded household. There would be tough conversations and tears and healing to be done. But tonight, driving home under a canopy of stars, Rachel felt a profound gratitude that transcended the horror of what they had endured. Her daughter was safe. A little boy who had lost everything had found a safe harbor, and Rachel herself had discovered a capacity for compassion she hadn't known she possessed.